their kids. In 2010, a 15-year-old boy started to notice that the door to his attic, which was in his bedroom, was always open. One day, when his mom's giving him a hard time about being lazy, he's like, well, you're one to talk. You always leave my attic door open. She's like, I haven't touched your attic door in months, and nobody else has either. Not easily frightened, the boy decides to leave the attic door open. And so he's laying in bed, and he kind of looks over at the door, and standing in the door frame is a figure staring right at him. He bolts, tells his parents, they don't believe him, and then 6 months later they move anyway. A few years later, the boy discovers his favorite teacher actually moved into his old house, and so he jokingly asks her, you ever see any ghosts walking around your attic? Her face got completely serious, and she's like, you know, as soon as we moved in, the door to the attic kept opening, so we investigated and we found a trap door that led onto the roof. Someone had been crawling in through that entrance and living in the attic for years. This is why you should always be afraid of Australia. In 2014, an 8-year-old and her family went on an extended vacation to, you guessed it, Australia. After a couple of days, she started having this horrible recurring nightmare where an alien would appear in her room and try to grab her with its tentacle. After a week of this, she is terrified to go to sleep, but her parents keep telling her that it's just her overactive imagination. One night, she swears she feels that thing grab her leg and she leaps from the bed screaming. Her family runs into the room and they see her hysterical in the corner, and then they look at the bed and they all gasp. It wasn't an alien. It was a 7-foot-long adult carpet python that had been sneaking in through the ceiling tile and into her bed to stay warm every night. Yes, the picture at the end is real. In 1876, a woman from a very prominent family in Paris goes missing. After years go by and no one has a clue what happened to this woman, friends and family ultimately mourn her death and move on. 25 years later, and this anonymous letter shows up on the Attorney General's desk, claiming that the missing woman's family had a secret. Intrigued by the letter, the police go to the family's home, show it to them, and ask to search the property, to which they say, go for it. They search, they don't find anything, but on the way out, they notice something very peculiar. At the end of some stairs was a door that was padlocked shut. When the family refused to open it, the police break it down and make a horrifying discovery. Cowering on a rotten straw mattress in a pitch-black room was the missing woman, now 50 years old and extremely malnourished. Her mother had imprisoned her there after they had fought over her boyfriend, and she had not seen sunlight or another human being in 25 years. Don't read the comments, it will spoil the very satisfying ending. In 1999, a 20-year-old kid was obsessed with this 16-year-old girl, but she wasn't into him. Frustrated, he breaks into her house and demands that she dates him. When she refuses, he kills her. And then he kills her 14-year-old sister too. Or so he thought. The 14-year-old survived and easily identified Paul Powell as the killer. Powell showed no remorse in court and even called the victim stupid. When he was sentenced to death, though, his attitude changed and he cried and begged for mercy. And unfortunately, mercy would come in the form of a legal loophole that switched his death sentence to a life sentence. Believing he was saved from the death penalty because of double jeopardy, he wrote this ridiculous letter to the prosecuting attorney, basically admitting to every single detail of the crime, kind of bragging about what he got away with. So the attorney just takes the letter, gives it to a judge. The judge looks at it and says, yep, there's new evidence here, orders a new trial, and immediately this dude is resentenced to death. And a few months later, this lowlife was executed. This is why you should always trust your gut. In the early 1970s, a college student decided to hitchhike his way home after class. A car pulls up, a man offers him a ride, and he climbs in. As soon as the car started moving, the student felt totally uneasy, like something was wrong but he couldn't quite place it. Without saying anything, he waited till the next time they slowed down and he flung the door open and ran away. 2 years later, he's flicking through TV channels when he comes across this special interview with a death row inmate. And it's just the audio recording, so he hears the interviewer ask the inmate, why did you remove all the door handles inside of your car? The man just goes, well, the first time I tried to kill someone, I picked up a college hitchhiker who got smart at some point and jumped out of my car. So, lesson learned, remove all the door handles. When they showed his picture, the student knew immediately that he was supposed to be the first victim of John Wayne Gacy, aka the Killer Clown, who had killed over 30 men and boys in his clown room and stuffed them into his basement. This is why you should always look under the toilet seat before you sit down. In 2003, over a 5-day period in London, 3 women showed up to hospitals with the same mysterious symptoms. They say they woke up with these horrible bite marks on the backs of their legs, and then while they're at the hospital, they become paralyzed and die. Despite their similar symptoms, the women had nothing in common except that they had recently been to the same pub. Authorities immediately shut it down and do a thorough search inside of the pub, but can't find anything deadly, until one of the detectives goes to use the pub's bathroom. As he's about to sit down, he thinks he sees something moving in the toilet, so he gives it a little kick. Hiding in the toilet was one of the world's largest and most poisonous spiders, the Brazilian wandering spider, and now they needed to catch it. This is why you should never talk to strangers. In the early 2000s, a young girl was waiting outside her friend's house peeling the bark off of a tree when a strange man approaches her. As he got closer, she could see that he was grinning ear to ear and his face was white as a ghost. He walks right up to her and pinches her on the arm and says, "How would you like it if I peeled your skin off?" Just then, her friend's mom yells for her to come inside, and the man walks away. It would be years before the girl's mother would finally tell her who this man really was. Her friend's mom had seen the man pinch her on the arm and had immediately called the police, who quickly rounded this guy up. Plastered all across the inside of his van were dozens of pictures of this girl, but what they found in his storage locker is straight out of a nightmare. In the locker was a chair with hand and arm restraints, next to it was an anatomy book, and hundreds of torture tools. This is why you might not want to eat deer meat. In late 2019, a man and his grandfather were out hunting when they spotted something way off in the distance that just didn't seem right. A deer was howling and then lowering its antlers and charging forward like a battering ram as if it was fighting with another animal. But when they crept closer, they could tell that the deer was all alone and something was definitely wrong with it. The deer was repeatedly ramming its head into a tree, and then finally one of its antlers breaks off and it kneels down and starts chewing on the antler. As they're watching in horror, the deer in a sudden lurching movement gets up on its hind legs and then walks like a human into the nearby lake, goes under, and does not resurface. Turns out the deer had chronic wasting disease, which is a new, highly contagious neurological disorder that drills holes in the brains of those affected and leads to a distinct lack of fear and awareness and is always fatal. And now, scientists are concerned it might spread to humans in 2020. This is why you should follow me on YouTube and Instagram.